Je dois également informer l'Assemblée que lors de ma visite à Dubaï, j'ai discuté et obtenu un bureau gratuit pour 2 ans pour abriter le bureau de représentation de l'IDB dans les locaux de la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie de Dubaï à Deira. Ce bureau a été inauguré en marge des célébrations de la fête nationale. En outre, l'IDB a signé des protocoles d'accord avec la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie de Dubaï, la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie d'Abu Dhabi, ainsi que la Fédération des chambres de commerce et d'industrie des Émirats arabes unis, afin de soutenir les initiatives de promotion du commerce et des investissements dans les Émirats. Monsieur le Président, au milieu des géants de l'Expo 2020 de Dubaï, Maurice a maximisé ses efforts pour s'assurer que sa participation soit pertinente, significative et produise des résultats tangibles. À la veille des célébrations de notre fête nationale à l'Expo 2020 de Dubaï, Son Altesse Cheikh Mohammed bin Rachid Al Maktoum, dirigeant de Dubaï, vice-président et Premier ministre des Émirats arabes unis, a visité le pavillon de Maurice. Plusieurs autres dignitaires des Émirats arabes unis et d'autres pays ont également visité le pavillon Maurice. Nous sommes convaincus que la visibilité que nous avons créée pour notre pays au milieu de cette pandémie mondiale portera ses fruits. Merci.
I have asked one specific question, Mr. the Speaker, sir, with regards to the expenses in relation to the ministerial delegation. Specifically, the expenses incurred by the ministerial delegations. I'm given to understand there were 13 ministerial delegations. What were the expenses in relation to these ministerial delegations?
Monsieur le Président, je vais vérifier. Ici, j'ai demandé les informations avec l'Economic Development Board. On m'a donné des informations. Je peux répondre? J'ai eu des informations concernant 6 forums organisés par l'IDB. Donc, j'ai répondu par rapport à ces 6 forums. Vous aviez posé la question, Monsieur le Président, la question était portée sur, si je le relis, including to obtain information at the number. Non, c'est pas ça. Donc, state the total cost incurred by the Mauritian government, including expenses relating to the setting up and operation of Mauritian events organized and official visits attended by Mauritian delegates. J'ai dit, il y a 6 forums, et il y a eu 1150 personnes qui sont venues pendant ces forums.
Next question.
Well, I'll come back to the same question. I've asked the costs, if you look at the question, the costs incurred by the ministerial delegation.
Non, non, Monsieur le Président. Je peux relire la question.
You said 13 delegations, and the minister replied he doesn't have the figure. Okay, this is quite in order. Now, if you're asking the cost in general, then the minister...
on m'a demandé, c'était the total cost incurred by the Mauritian government. J'ai dit dans ma réponse...
So I'm satisfied. Let me give Honourable Juman the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Minister, you mentioned 109 million for the rental and setting up of the Mauritian pavilion, for the promotion of Mauritius, Mauritian product, Mauritian savoir-faire. So why, Honourable Minister, on the 17th of March 2022, students from Fashion and Design Institutes of Mauritius were compelled to display their product at the France pavilion instead of Mauritian pavilion in the presence of Minister Bola and his press attaché, who was part of the delegation?
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais déjà rectifier peut-être, mais j'ai parlé d'une dépense, le coût pour le gouvernement mauricien de 43,9 millions de roupies, et non de 100 millions ou 110 millions. Ouais. C'est ça que j'aimerais préciser, 43,9 millions.
We are in the temple of democracy. Excuse me, Minister. We are in the temple of democracy. You have to respect the temple. Minister is replying and replying. What is? Please.
Et j'ajoute, je ne suis pas au courant de ce que vous venez de dire, mais je pense que si jamais on a eu parfois à bouger et à ne pas pouvoir exposer dans le pavillon national, parce que déjà, si on avait pris un pavillon plus élevé, plus grand, ça nous aurait coûté plus cher, mais surtout parce qu'il y avait beaucoup de personnes qui visitaient notre pavillon, et donc peut-être qu'il y avait un problème de place. Pour cela, Monsieur le Président, je souhaiterais demander à l'honorable membre de poser une question spécifique à l'honorable Bola concernant cette aventure.
Good. Now, Honourable.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le ministre, vous parlez de 43 millions de roupies dépensés par le gouvernement mauricien pour le Expo Dubaï 2020. Est-ce qu'on peut confirmer que, puisque c'est le ministère des Finances qui approuve les voyages des ministres, est-ce que vous pouvez confirmer le nombre de ministres qui ont visité l'Expo Dubaï 2020?
Monsieur le Président, j'ai dans la liste des PQ d'aujourd'hui, à un certain moment, j'ai une question concernant les différentes délégations ministérielles et de la composition, etc., où je vais répondre à cette question. Mais là, malheureusement, je ne vais pas répondre maintenant parce que c'est une question qui ne correspond pas à la question demandée par l'honorable. Mais je vais répondre. Bien sûr, je vais répondre.
Yeah. I've told you, honourable members, your question should be specific. Your question should be related to the main question. It may be your opinion. It's not my opinion. No, but you don't have the floor. To start with, you don't have the floor. You don't have the floor. You don't have the floor. You're not having the floor. Okay, I'm satisfied with the reply and the question, please.
Yes. So, amongst those expenses that the Honourable Minister has stated, there were 13 missions for ministers that were approved by the Minister of Finance. Now, does the Minister of Finance think that was it a good utilization of public funds in those difficult circumstances when we have a public debt of 419 milliards and we are advised to cut costs to approve those missions?
Monsieur le Président, écoutez, quand vous êtes en train de gérer un pays, quand vous êtes des décideurs publics, vous devez faire des choix. Faire un choix et dépenser 43,9 millions de roupies pour générer un minimum, je dis bien un minimum, de 4,5 milliards de roupies d'investissement direct, et surtout en devises étrangères, je pense que c'était une bonne opportunité. Merci.
The question has been sufficiently canvassed. The table has been advised that question B154, B168, B3201, B188, B189, I'm sorry, B181, B148, B177, B191, B199, B200 have been withdrawn. Next question.
B123.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the 15 pharmaceutical products that are mostly purchased thereat are as follows: Diamicron, Galvus, Glipmevia, Fervex, Panadol, Doliprane, Revitalose, Voltaren, Zentel, Glucophage, Ventolin, Telma, Candide B cream, Olfen, and Gaviscon. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the average percentage increase in the
Order both sides of the House.
Prices are thereof since 2015, I'm informed by the Ministry of Commerce and Consumer Protection that the price fixing information system became operational in 2017. As such, Records available on the system date back to that year. I'm also informed that the average percentage increase in the retail prices of the above-mentioned pharmaceutical products is 25 to 30% on a yearly basis since 2017. The main factors that account for this increase include a rise in cost, insurance, and freight. The rate of exchange has also impacted on the retail price. Mr. Speaker, sir, another factor for the increase in prices is the increase in the price of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, API, therefore increasing the cost of manufacturing of the products. Thank you.
Et peut-être j'ai pas retenu, est-ce que le ministre peut préciser quelle est la marge prescrite aux pharmacies pour ces médicaments, pour quelques médicaments? Quelle est la marge?
Mr. Speaker, sir, a markup of 35%, that is 11% for wholesale and 24% for retail, and a special allowance of 2% is applicable on all pharmaceutical products.
Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Honourable Minister, maybe slightly related to the question, whether the drug misoprostol, also known as Cytotec, which is used illegally for the termination of pregnancy, is on the increase, and whether his ministry has taken any measures or can take any measures to curtail its off-counter sale.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this medication is not on that 15 medication listed. If the Honourable Member will come up with a specific question, definitely I'll give the reply.
Honourable Team.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, the Honourable Minister have just mentioned about price increase in pharmaceutical product. Is he aware of the recommendation made by the Competition Commission that the law be amended to enable parallel import in pharmaceutical products so that we can have generic medicine and therefore reduce the price of drugs, especially those that are commonly used, those 15 products that are commonly used?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the recommendation of the Competition Commission is under the mandate of the Ministry of Commerce, and I believe he's working on all the application of those recommendations.
You have a question?
Yes. Does the Minister agree that the massive increase in the price of pharmaceutical products is largely due to the inability of the government to address fundamental problems like inflation, and I would expect this ministry to liaise with the Minister of Finance to address this problem, because availability of drugs is of paramount importance to all those patients who suffer from acute and chronic disorders.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't agree with the observation made by the Honourable Member, but nevertheless, today in the PNQ sessions, the Minister of Finance has already given all the working sessions that he is having with the different stakeholders for the price mechanism and other issues.
Last supplementary.
Le ministre est certainement d'accord que la plupart des 15 médicaments cités sont utilisés par les diabétiques et les personnes âgées. Et cela pose énormément de pression sur le budget familial de ces personnes. Monsieur le ministre, est-ce que le ministre ne considère-t-il pas que le règlement qu'il a adopté au cabinet en décembre 2021, qui permet aux pharmaciens de facturer jusqu'à 300 roupies par ordonnance, est-ce que ce règlement, monsieur le ministre, n'est pas grossièrement abusif et injuste envers la population et surtout envers les retraités et les diabétiques?
Mr. Speaker, sir, among those 15 medications, 3 are anti-diabetic drugs. Now, whether this is, it is not the majority of the drugs that are being cited here as among the 15 drugs. Now, the question of the regulations, the honourable member should also pointed out that these regulations have come into play after the recommendations made by the Drug Commission, and where the pharmacists have to abide to a code of practice, and this is the Council's decision to prepare the code of regulations for the pharmacists. Obviously, what has been reported in the press, I have already given official statement. The Pharmacy Council has already given their official statement. I believe this chapter is closed. There is no additional fees that the consumer has to pay for medication.
Next question.
B124.
Monsieur le Président, faisant suite au dépôt du rapport du directeur de l'audit à l'Assemblée nationale, le ministère des Finances a sollicité les autres ministères afin d'analyser toutes les questions soulevées par le directeur de l'audit en vue de remédier à quelconque faiblesse et lacune. En outre, permettez-moi d'informer l'Assemblée que la circulaire budgétaire 2022-2023 publiée par le ministère des Finances pour le prochain exercice budgétaire formule expressément la demande à tous les ministères, départements, d'éliminer les dépenses non productives et de traiter les questions soulevées par le directeur de l'audit dans ses rapports lors de la formulation de leurs prévisions budgétaires. Afin d'améliorer la gestion des dépenses, la responsabilité et la transparence, la Finance and Audit Act a été amendée pour obliger les ministères et les départements à inclure un plan de mise en œuvre dans leur rapport annuel. Et cela afin d'éviter la répétition des lacunes signalées par le directeur de l'audit. Je souhaite également souligner que l'Office of Public Sector Governance, sous l'égide du ministère des Services financiers et de la bonne gouvernance, est chargé de contrôler et de suivre les recommandations du directeur de l'audit ainsi que de rendre compte de leur mise en œuvre réussie. En outre, le rapport annuel des ministères-départements comprend désormais une déclaration indiquant un plan de mise en œuvre des mesures correctives et de prévention de la récurrence des lacunes en ce qui concerne la gestion des fonds publics mentionnés dans le rapport du directeur de l'audit. Le directeur du contrôle interne du ministère des Finances a été chargé de mettre en place une équipe dédiée pour analyser les gaspillages des fonds publics mentionnés dans le rapport d'audit et le rapport du comité des comptes publics. Cette unité devra également préparer un plan de travail pour traiter ces questions en collaboration avec les comités d'audit des ministères et départements. Il convient de noter que des mesures sont prises pour 190 des 201 problèmes constatations mis en évidence dans le rapport d'audit de l'exercice 2019-2020. Un exercice similaire sera entrepris pour le rapport de l'exercice 2020-2021. Merci.
Monsieur le ministre, y a-t-il un mécanisme mis en place pour assurer un suivi? Si oui, pourquoi n'a-t-on pas eu des retombées positives jusqu'ici, d'autant que ce sont plus ou moins le même ministère, le même département qui sont à chaque fois pointés du doigt?
Monsieur le Président, je rappelle à l'honorable membre que par rapport au rapport 2019-2020, sur les 201 problèmes et constatations qui ont été mises en évidence, nous avons travaillé pour améliorer et donner des réponses pour 190 problèmes et constatations. Donc nous allons répéter cet exercice. C'est sûr que c'est un exercice qui prend du temps, mais en même temps, il nous faut des organes de contrôle. Chez nous, il y a le directeur du contrôle interne au niveau du ministère des Finances qui travaille dessus et à chaque fois, il vient avec les rapports pour améliorer le processus concernant l'audit.
Thank you very much. Minister, I think you are game for a laugh. I might understand, and you should know better, that the Office for Sector Governance has been in operation since more than a decade. Year in, year out, we are taken to task by the Director of Audit. What concrete measures have been taken to address this issue up front?
Je répète, Monsieur le Président, parce que je crois que l'honorable membre, en plus, il a cette mauvaise manière de commenter en même temps qu'on fait la réponse. S'il vous plaît, écoutez la réponse, je viens de le dire. Le directeur de l'audit fait son rapport et nous, au niveau de ce gouvernement, nous avons mis en place des contrôles et nous travaillons pour améliorer cette gestion avec la bonne gouvernance. Donc nous travaillons, il y a eu des résultats et on l'a publié dans le dernier budget. Merci,
Honourable Mia. Well, the Honourable Minister agree with me, but it's high time to amend the law for those who are responsible for wastage of public funds are prosecuted.
Monsieur le Président, c'est une noble suggestion de la part de l'honorable membre et ce sera pris en considération. Je vais débattre de cela avec le ministère et puis on va travailler dessus. Mais je le redis et j'aimerais que ce soit entendu ici, au niveau de chaque ministère, et ça j'aimerais qu'on le comprenne, les fonctionnaires font un travail formidable pour essayer d'améliorer la vie de la population en entier. Et c'est sûr que de temps à autre, vous avez des problèmes dans la gestion. Et le but, c'est ça le garde-fou. On a un garde-fou avec le bureau de l'audit qui nous dit comment améliorer la gestion des finances publiques. Et cela est un formidable outil de démocratie, car ce directeur, en toute indépendance, il nous dit où on peut améliorer. Et nous faisons en sorte d'améliorer la gestion de la finance publique. Mais c'est sûr qu'une gestion parfaite des finances publiques est très difficilement atteignable. Merci.
Last supplementary, MP Utim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, the Honourable Minister is aware that the report of the National Audit came out last week, and he highlighted that only 20% of his recommendation was implemented. So is the Honourable Minister satisfied with this figure, and will he also take a commitment on behalf of the government and the nation that henceforth ministers will not give verbal instruction to a civil servant to carry out procurement exercise?
Monsieur le Président, 20%, 10%, 30%, nous travaillons pour améliorer la gestion des finances publiques. Et il n'est pas de mon ressort au niveau, et en tant que ministre des Finances et aussi au ministère des Finances, de prendre l'engagement, ce genre d'engagement. Nous travaillons de concert avec le gouvernement et nous faisons en sorte d'améliorer la gestion des finances publiques pour le bien-être de toute la population. Merci.
Next question.
B125.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I will be replying to both PQs B125 and B137 together as they relate to the same subject matter. Mr. Speaker, sir, dangerous drugs or drugs like opioids, cannabinoids, stimulants, narcotics, and psychotropics. People who inject drugs, PWIDs, are injecting drug users, while people who use drugs, PWUDs, are non-injecting drug users who use illicit drugs. According to the Integrated Biological and Behavioral Surveillance Survey, IBBS 2020, the estimated population size of people who inject drugs in 2020 in the island of Mauritius was 6,600. Furthermore, it is estimated that there are around 55,000 non-injecting drug users, according to the national survey among people who use drugs carried out in September 2021 by the National Drug Secretariat under the Prime Minister's Office. As regards to this estimated number of people who inject drugs and those who use non-injectable drugs district-wise, no such information is available. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to Part B of the question 125 and PQ 137, you may wish to note that my ministry offers the following substitution therapies, support programs, and rehabilitation services. First, the Needle Exchange Program. This program is a government-led outreach program targeting people who inject drugs with a view to curb the trend of HIV and hepatitis B and C infection in this vulnerable population. The program is jointly implemented by the Ministry of Health and by the non-governmental organization CUT, Collectif Urgence Tuxida, and recently the NGO L. There is a total of 45 needle exchange program sites. Steroid needles, syringes, alcohol swabs, and condoms are distributed to beneficiaries of the program run both by my ministry and the NGOs. Mr. Speaker, sir. Second is the methadone substitution therapy. As at date, around 6,500 beneficiaries are on the maintenance program and accessing their daily doses at 48 dispensing points throughout the country, including the 4 sites within the prisons. The 4 methadone daycare centers are operational at Sainte-Croix, Cassis, Maïbo, and Frangipane Drug Treatment and Rehabilitation Center at Bransecor Mental Health Care Center, Beaubassin. The third program is the addiction units. The drug addiction units are found at Long Mountain Hospital, Bruno Thiong Hospital, FLAC, Dr. Jitu Hospital, Victoria Hospital, and Mayberg Hospital. All the services provided are based on a combination of psychosocial and pharmacotherapies, including detoxification, aftercare, and involve family, friends, and social workers. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 4th program is a Suboxone naltrexone treatment. People who inject drugs are also offered a detoxification program. The Opioid Detoxification Center at Mayberg has as its main objective to conduct heroin detoxification using reduced doses of Suboxone and naltrexone in a protected ward environment over a period of 2 weeks to help people with heroin dependence achieve a drug-free lifestyle. The 5th program is the residential rehabilitation centers. With regard to people who use drugs, there are currently 3 residential drug treatment and rehabilitation centers operational under my ministry. They are as follows. The Nenifor Center at Long Mountain with a capacity of 12 beds for rehabilitation mainly of minors and young people under the age of 23, and the Frangipane Center at Beaubassin with a capacity of 12 beds for rehabilitation of male adults aged 18 and above. Mr. Speaker, sir, these therapies are offered at the rehabilitation centers mentioned above are as follows: general counseling, relapse prevention strategies, family therapy, motivational therapy, group and individual counseling, and cognitive behavioral therapy. All the services provided are based on a combination of psychosocial and pharmacotherapies, including detoxification, aftercare, and family, friends, and social workers' involvement. The service is offered in full confidentiality to all people who use drugs and tailor-made with respect to the type of drug of concern. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the eligibility criteria to benefit from substitution therapies and support programs, the following factors are taken into consideration. First, outcome of previous abstinence-based treatment. Second, age of patient. Third, duration of opioid use. Fourth, patient preference. Fifth, type of opioid used. And lastly, amount of opioid use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Can the Honourable Minister inform the House whether his ministry has worked out any specific program for the rehabilitation of female drug users?
Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, in fact, my ministry is making separate special wards for the rehabilitation of female drug users, and that dedicated center will be at Bronsecor Hospital. This new detoxification and rehabilitation center will be operational in some weeks' time. It will offer patients treatment using Suboxone and Naltrexone, as well as another option for patients who do not wish to be induced on this treatment, that is the methadone. This center will be led by a psychiatrist supported by medical officer, psychologist, trained nursing staff, as well as social worker. It will offer family, motivational, and cognitive therapy. Patients will be also empowered with appropriate life skills for their smooth reintegration into the society.
Thank you, Speaker. Can the Minister inform the House on progress made regarding the setting up of a drug offenders administrative panel?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. So the setting up of a DOAP, Drug Offenders Administrative Panel, it is in fact a recommendation of the Commission of Inquiry on Drugs. The House will note that Cabinet has already given its approval for the setting up of this panel, which will be completely detached from the criminal justice system. The DOAP will ensure that victims of substance abuse will be given a chance to go rehabilitation. The Ministry of Finance has already given approval for the financing of the body, which amounts to some 15 million rupees per year. A proposed location for the setting up of the DOAP has already been identified at Bronsecor Hospital. I'm informed that we should now bring amendments to the Dangerous Drug Act and also draft a new bill. The first meeting regrouping representatives of the police, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Forensic Science Laboratory for their respective inputs with regards to the drafting of the new bill has already been conducted.
Can the Minister inform the House if codeine is still being used for rehabilitation of drug victims?
No, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm informed that codeine-based treatment is no longer used in Mauritius. In fact, the decision was unanimously taken following a working session with Dr. Mete, Chief Addictology Services at the Centre Hospitalier et Universitaire de la Réunion, representatives of 9 NGOs working for the rehabilitation of drug victims and officers of my ministry. Codeine-based treatment is an old treatment which is no longer in use in other countries as the success rate is very low. The same tendency was noted in Mauritius, and the low success rate were detrimental to victims who wanted to rehabilitate themselves, as it gave them a sense of failure and low self-esteem.
Last supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In view of the increasing number of drug users in the country and the expectation that it's approximately 500 to 700 yearly, will his ministry consider, as part of substitution therapy, the take-home dose, which is widely used in Europe now, particularly in a different formulation, considering the overcrowding of methadone at dispensing sites?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, honourable members, you are too perfectly right that even the Commission has recommended for the take-home doses, But since the methadone that we do dispense to the clients, you can't keep them for more than 24 hours. So we have to have another formulation of this methadone so that we can give take-home doses. But we have so far been able to introduce take-home doses, especially on Saturdays, for those who are attending the substitution therapy on methadone, so that they can have it till Monday. But yet we have to change the formulation before implementing this.
MP Ganga Prasad.
B126.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed by the Central Water Authority that bids were launched in November 2020 for the supply of 10 water tanker trucks of capacity 10 meter cube and fitted with global positioning system in order to supplement its existing fleet and reduce its dependence on private water tankers. The services of these private water tankers were costly to the authority and in many cases were not satisfactory in view of the numerous representations received from several quarters. This project was funded under the Economic Recovery Programme. The contract was subsequently awarded on 18th June 2021 to ABC Motors Company Limited in the sum of rupees 40,273,650 rupees, inclusive of a contingency sum of 3 million rupees and exclusive of VAT. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to parts B and C of the question, I am informed by the Central Water Authority that the make of the water tanker truck is model ECHA Pro 6025 and the country of origin is India. As already indicated, the name of the supplier is ABC Motors Company Limited. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, sir, will the Honourable Minister confirm to the House whether one of the water tankers broke down in Goodlands only a few days after becoming operational and obviously impacting negatively on the consumers, and the Honourable Minister had a ride on one of the lorries from Riyadh to Pamplemousse? Will he confirm whether the speed limiter and water pump of these water tankers are already showing signs of being defective?
Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, I had a ride in one of the trucks, specifically to verify a few issues which were brought to my attention. It's not that we had problems with only one water tanker. We had problems with 5 water tankers. And 4 out of those 5 were located in the northern zone of the country. And I know why. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the problems were related to auxiliary equipment of the lorry, not with the engine of the lorry.
Speaker, sir, may I ask the Honourable Minister to inform the House whether, further to the acquisition of these water tankers, if proper training has been provided to the 30 drivers as specified in the tender document, and to explain why an additional item, that is a contingency cost of 3 million rupees, has been added in the price schedule of the tender for the purchase of the 10 water tankers.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the heavy vehicle drivers at the CWA have been trained properly to drive those 10 water tankers, and I understand also that there are drivers with long experience in driving those type of heavy trucks. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have in the fleet a total of 25 trucks now, and that is why I said that the drivers have been trained to drive these vehicles. With regard to the 3 million contingency plan, I don't have the reply with me, Mr. Speaker, sir, but I can provide same to the Honourable Member.
Minister, may we know how successfully the problem of water shortage has been addressed after the acquisition of these 10 water tankers?
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is clear that with the addition of these additional water trucks, we have been able to provide additional water to the water-stressed region, especially in the northern, eastern, and western part of the country. That's one, the first issue. And secondly, I said in my main reply, we have both additional water tankers because it was sting a lot of money to the Central Water Authority to hire private tankers. The annual payment to private water tankers were of the order of 50 million rupees. We bought 10 trucks for 40 million rupees. That is, we've saved also, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The table has been advised that PQ B153, B175 have been withdrawn. Next question.
B127.
Monsieur le Président, face aux défis environnementaux émergents, une révision en profondeur de l'Environment Protection Act 2002 a été vivement préconisée et recommandée lors des assises de l'environnement organisées par mon ministère en décembre 2019. Cette proposition a ensuite été retenue par mon ministère comme l'une des principales recommandations du Forum national, et le financement du projet a été obtenu de l'UNDP Country Office en septembre 2020. En novembre 2020, le UNDP Country Office a fait appel au service des consultants juridiques, tant international que national, pour un examen complet du cadre législatif en vigueur régissant la gestion de l'environnement. Les propositions finales, comprenant une série de recommandations d'amendements à l'IPA, ainsi qu'un draft Environment Protection Amendment Bill sous la forme d'un document de travail, ont été soumis par le consultant le 20 mars 2022. L'approbation du gouvernement à mon ministère pour émettre des instructions de rédaction au bureau de l'Attorney General sur les modifications proposées à l'IPA a été obtenue le 1er avril 2022. Monsieur le Président, en ce qui concerne les parties A et B de la question, je dois souligner que des consultations approfondies ont été menées avec toutes les parties prenantes, y compris les ministères, les départements, les autorités locales, les universités, les universitaires, les organisations du secteur privé, les organisations non gouvernementales et même des membres du public. Je dois aussi souligner, Monsieur le Président, que suite aux assises de l'environnement, un atelier consultatif de 2 jours sur la politique nationale de l'environnement a été organisé par mon ministère en collaboration avec l'UNDP Country Office en décembre 2020, où des consultations publiques relatives à la révision de l'IPA ont été poursuivies. Ce forum a regroupé un large éventail de parties prenantes et comprenant quelques 130 participants d'organisations du secteur privé, la commission de l'environnement, le forestry, le tourisme, les parcs marins et de la pêche de Rodrigue, et aussi le milieu universitaire et les ONG ainsi que la société civile. Pour garantir un processus de consultation inclusif, les commentaires du public ont été invités par le biais d'un communiqué de presse publié par mon ministère en février 2021. Les commentaires reçus dans le cadre de ce processus ont été dûment transmis aux consultants. Plusieurs discussions ciblées avec les organismes chargés de l'application de l'IPA ont également été organisées par le département de l'environnement de mon ministère sur des domaines thématiques spécifiques l'année dernière. Monsieur le Président, avant la clôture de l'exercice de conseil, le document de travail contenant les amendements proposés par les consultants à l'IPA ont été largement diffusés aux principales parties prenantes, y compris les ministères, les différents départements et les organisations du secteur privé, le MACOS, qui est la plateforme nationale reconnue des ONG, les organisations de la société civile pour la promotion du développement durable, et les 16 février et le 10 mars 2022, sollicitant leur point de vue et commentaires avant une réunion consultative. En deux occasions, le MACOS a fait circuler les propositions auprès de ses membres. Les amendements proposés à l'IPA ont ensuite été discutés par les parties prenantes lors d'une réunion consultative de 3 jours, tenue virtuellement avec le consultant juridique international du 14 au 16 mars 2022. Monsieur le Président, avec votre permission, je dépose la liste des intervenants qui ont été sollicités pour participer aux consultations. En ce qui concerne la partie C de la question, Monsieur le Président, étant donné que des amendements majeurs sont proposés à l'IPA face aux complexités et urgences environnementales, locales et mondiales, la finalisation du projet de loi sur la protection de l'environnement par le bureau de l'Attorney General entraînerait vraisemblablement de nouvelles discussions avec mon ministère et d'autres organismes publics et privés. Le projet de loi devrait néanmoins être déposé à l'Assemblée nationale avant la fin de l'année.
Merci. Je n'ai malheureusement pas reçu la liste de ceux qui ont reçu les amendements. J'aimerais bien la recevoir si possible. Est-ce que le ministre peut nous expliquer pourquoi certaines entités ayant participé aux assises de l'environnement et au National Consultative Workshop ont reçu une copie de ces amendements, notamment, comme il a mentionné, la MACOS et Business Mauritius, pour que soient soumis leurs commentaires, alors que d'autres entités, notamment certaines ONG qui ont participé elles aussi à ces deux événements, n'ont pas été consultées avant que le draft soit envoyé au State Law Office. Pourquoi cette discrimination?
Monsieur le Président, j'ai mentionné tout le parcours qui a été mentionné en termes de consultation des différents stakeholders, les organismes publics, privés, les ONG. Je pense que ça a été suffisamment explicite dans ma réponse en ce qui concerne toutes les consultations qui ont été faites, Monsieur le Président.
Can the Honourable Minister give the guarantee that with those amendments, preliminary environmental reports, additional information submitted during the environmental process, and the reason for granting and rejecting an environmental impact assessment will be compulsory and will be made public?
Monsieur le Président, les amendements à l'Environment Protection Act seront très détaillés. Je dois dire que c'est un document très travaillé avec toutes les parties prenantes. Je dois dire que les amendements proposés toucheront plusieurs thèmes. Et permettez-moi de citer quelques thèmes. Il y a toute la question en ce qui concerne le Environmental Management and Sustainable Development. Il y aura toute la question en ce qui concerne le renaming du National Environment Commission sous l'appellation du National Sustainable Development Commission. Il y aura l'établissement de l'Observatoire de l'environnement. Nous viendrons de l'avant aussi, Monsieur le Président, avec le Environmentally Sensitive Areas et avec la proposition de venir de l'avant avec un ISA Coordination Committee Advisory. Je dois dire aussi que, Monsieur le Président, que nous viendrons de l'avant avec un coordination framework en ce qui concerne le National Oil Spill Contingency Plan. Nous viendrons de l'avant aussi, Monsieur le Président, en ce qui concerne l'Enforcement and Compliance Mechanism pour qu'on puisse venir de l'avant avec un legal framework pour donner plus de pouvoir pour qu'on puisse implémenter les mesures touchant à toute infraction concernant la protection de l'environnement. Et aussi, Monsieur le Président, nous allons considérer toute la question en ce qui concerne le management et aussi toute la question de production, de consommation du plastique, toute la question relevant de la pollution plastique. En ce qui concerne le Environment Impact Assessment, nous sommes totalement conscients des demandes qui ont été faites par différentes parties prenantes concernant la question de transparence en ce qui concerne l'application qui est faite pour le Environment Impact Assessment, en ce qui concerne les additional information qui sont des fois soumis par les différents applicants. Je peux, à ce stade des choses, Monsieur le Président, réassurer la Chambre que nous sommes en train de prendre tout cela en considération.
One last supplementary, please. Can I ask the Honourable Minister to give the assurance that the Strategic Environment Assessment will be reinstated in the Environment Protection Act?
Oui, Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai bien mentionné, donc nous viendrons de là parce que pour nous, il convient de s'assurer avant tout que nous puissions avoir le framework nécessaire pour considérer tout ce qui touche à l'Environment Impact Assessment. Nous viendrons de l'avant aussi avec toute la question en ce qui concerne le Strategic Environmental Assessment, parce que nous considérons qu'il est important pour nous de pouvoir venir de l'avant de donner tous les renseignements nécessaires aux membres du public, aux différents stakeholders, at the very inception stage of a plan, et que tout un chacun puisse prendre connaissance de tout projet y relatif.
Honourable Member, the Chair has been advised that it is PQ B153 and B211 which have been withdrawn instead of B175. Next question.
B128. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to thank the Honourable Member for giving me the opportunity to inform the House of development on this major infrastructural work currently underway. With the growing number of cancer patients in Mauritius, and as a responsible and caring government, and the personal dedication of our Prime Minister, we embark on the implementation of a specialized hospital for cancer treatment at Solferino. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will note that the radiology, radiotherapy, and immunotherapy departments will be available in the new building of the new cancer center, equipped with PET scan, SPECT scan, and 3-dimension linear accelerator. In addition, a daycare ward as well as several wards to accommodate 115 patients would be available in the new building. Immunocompromised patients room, stem cell laboratory, endoscopy, UGI endoscopy and recovery rooms, operation theaters will also be accommodated within the new building. In addition, an outpatient department will also be operational in the new cancer center. Let me also inform the House that works in the renovated building was completed in October 2020, and the cancer center is operational since 23rd October 2020. Around 100 patients visit the hospital on a daily basis for chemotherapy sessions, and some 70 patients are given intravenous chemotherapy. With regard to inpatients, 67 beds, 29 male and 38 females are available, which cater for inpatients with complications or those requiring long sessions of chemotherapy and palliative care.
Supplementary?
Yes. From what I gather from the answer is that in the new cancer hospital, only chemotherapy is right now available. All the other facilities will be available in time. Can I know from the Minister when will the linear accelerators, the HDR brachytherapy, the PET scan and the SPECT scan, which has been already acquired, will be operational and the full operation of the hospital will be possible?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to the PET scan, so this is partly it is a donation from the International Atomic Energy Association, and partly it is financed by the ministry. So they are doing the exercise for the procurement of this PET scan. And yesterday we had a meeting with a representative who is in Mauritius at present, and we have been informed that the equipment will be ready by end of this year. In regard to the other equipment, the three-dimensional linear accelerators, so these procedures are being undertaken by the HSCC India for the procurement of these specialized apparatus. So hopefully, if there is no other major issues, we will be receiving these equipments by mid of next year.
Yes, has your ministry already make provision for the surplus specialized staffs that will be needed to work in such specialized place?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. So in line with the, we recently have the National Cancer Control Program, and that was the action plan that the ministry is undertaking, especially in terms of staffing, in terms of screening program, or as well for cancer. So these are the NCCP, the program, the implementation will be in due course, and we hopefully will have the trained staff, especially for these specialized equipment as
well. Since the chemotherapy and radiology departments are in different hospitals, some patients have to undergo chemo in the morning, and they have to undergo radiology in the afternoon. And most of the time, there is an overlap in the appointment times, and they miss one of the sessions and have to wait for another being the treatment being very long. So would the minister review a protocol to provide transport from one hospital to the another, or even review the timing for the radiology and the chemo and offer it on a 24/7 basis as other services are offered in the hospitals?
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me explain probably. The equipment used for radiotherapy, they are the Cobalt, there is a machine they call Cobalt, and another one is a linear accelerator. They are both at the radiotherapy department at Victoria Hospital. Now, over here we have extended the facilities because I believe in the past the Honourable Béranger did raise this question and especially why there are so many patients attending the Victoria Hospital when we don't have that much space over there, and that was catered at the new cancer center. Now, obviously, there are some overlapping in appointments, or we have to accommodate transport facilities. The ministry will look and try to make it as possible to facilitate these patients.
MP Mia. Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. One of the criticisms in the treatment of cancer at Victoria Hospital is the long hours of waiting time for cancer patients. Therefore, can I ask the Honourable Minister if needful can be done for the new cancer centre to reduce the waiting time for cancer patients as they are already suffering?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. So again, So if we have two equipments or three equipment, especially for those coming for radiotherapy, so that's what build up in terms of the waiting time. But with the coming into operation of the new cancer center, this waiting time will, remarkably be reduced.
Next question.
Mr. Speaker, sir. So as at date, the respective number of Covaxin, Covishield, AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, and Sputnik vaccine that has been procured is as follows. So 100,000 doses of Covishield vaccine from the Serum Institute of India and 100,800 doses of AstraZeneca through the COVAX facility. 200,000 doses of Covaxin from Bharat BioNTech Limited from India, 1,500,000 doses of Sinopharm vaccine from Sinopharm International Hong Kong Limited of China, and 60,000 doses of Component 1 and 60,000 doses of Component 2 of Sputnik vaccine from the Russian Development Investment Fund. Mr. Speaker, so I am further informed that the respective number of COVID-19 vaccine that has been donated by friendly countries are as follows. 100,000 doses of Covishield vaccines from the Government of India, 100,000 doses of Sinopharm vaccine from the Government of the People's Republic of China, and 5,000 doses of Sinopharm vaccine, Hayat Vax, as we call it, from the United Arab Emirates. Mr. Speaker, so in reply to part A of the question, I'm informed that 100,119 persons have been administered a first dose of Covaxin, and 99,062 persons have been received a second dose of the same vaccine. As regards to Covishield AstraZeneca vaccine, 161,289 persons have received a first dose, and 156,294 persons have been administered a second dose, and 2,825 persons have received a booster dose of this vaccine, that is the AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine. Now, 483,032 persons have received a first dose of Sinopharm vaccine, while 471,750 persons have received a second dose of the vaccine. On the other hand, 10,744 persons have received a booster dose of the Sinopharm vaccine. Moreover, 36,956 persons were administered component 1 of Sputnik vaccine, and the component 2, the number of persons who have received the component 2 of this vaccine is 33,302. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, in reply to part B1 and B2 of the question, I wish to inform the House that out of these 4 vaccines stated therein, only Sinopharm vaccines are still available, and the stock as at 31st March 2022 was 68,800, out of which 8,800 doses will expire in June 2023, and 60,000 doses will expire in August 2023. These vaccines are being stored at 2 to 8 degrees at Plaine d'Ezon warehouse and in the 5 regional hospitals.
Peut-on savoir de l'honorable ministre, si j'ai bien compris sa réponse, il n'y a que du Sinopharm qui est actuellement en stock. Peut-on savoir si son ministère compte utiliser à nouveau le vaccin Sinopharm dans son programme de vaccination?
Mr. Speaker, sir, this will be decided by the vaccination committee. So far, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So obviously, if ever there is a need to use this vaccine, but for the time being, for the booster dose, we are administering the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines.
Il était question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Suite à la suspension en approvisionnement du vaccin Covaxin par l'OMS, il y a quelques jours de cela, à cause des lacunes trouvées dans les pratiques de fabrication, et malgré que pour l'instant, ils n'ont pas trouvé de problème par rapport à l'efficacité et la sûreté de ce vaccin, mais dans l'intérêt de la santé des 100 000 personnes ayant reçu ce vaccin, le ministre a-t-il l'intention d'être prévoyant et de demander à ce segment de la population de communiquer leur état de santé et de faciliter et permettre qu'ils fassent un bilan de santé?
Mr. Speaker, sir, these vaccines were administered more than a year now, and so far there is no complaint on this vaccination. Should the WHO issue guidelines on what have to be done for those who have received these vaccines, obviously the ministry will abide to those guidelines. But so far, there is nothing in this respect to how to, again, we should contact those persons who have received these vaccines, and it's already in 1 year. The Pharmacovigilance Committee set up under my ministry is been watching what's happening. It's been doing all the, observations on any of these vaccines. Should we have any complaint, we would have definitely reported to the public.
The Minister has informed the House that the total dose of AstraZeneca, both procured and donated, stand at around 300,800. Yet, you informed the House that the total dose of AstraZeneca administered stands to around 320,408. So there seems to be a surplus of 19,608. Can the Minister inform the House as to why there may have been such a disparity?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, yes. In fact, we received 300,800 doses of AstraZeneca, and we administered 320,408 doses of this same vaccine. Why this happened? Because in many of the vials, we have extra doses. And instead of having only 10 doses per vial, we were able to secure 11 and 12 doses from one vial. That's why we have been able to vaccinate more than what was there in the number of vaccines that we received.
Last supplementary.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, l'honorable ministre a informé la Chambre qu'il y a un certain nombre de vaccins qui seront bientôt expirés. Peut-on savoir à combien se chiffre ce stock de vaccins qui seront expirés bientôt?
Mr. Speaker, sir, in my reply, I've given the number of doses of vaccine that will expire next year, 2023, in August and in June, yes, in the Sinopharm vaccines. So it is 68,800 that will expire in 1 year. So that is the vaccines, yeah.
Next question.
B130, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed by the Municipal Council of Wakwa Phoenix that an amount of 7 million was earmarked under the Local Development Project 2021 and 2022, and 25 million under the Economic Recovery Program number 2 for the resurfacing of road in constituency numbers 15 and 16. With regard to part A of the question, the Municipal Council of Wakwa Phoenix has, following a procurement exercise, awarded the contract to Transinvest Construction Limited for the project resurfacing of road. Regarding to part B of the question, as a date work for a total amount of 14 million have been undertaken. I'm tabling a list of the roads which have already been resurfaced in constituency number 15 by the Municipal Council of Wakwa Phoenix, including those which are scheduled to be resurfaced in due course.
Yes. May I know from the Honourable Vice Prime Minister, what are the criteria that are used to select the priority being given to the roads and the lanes that should be asphalted in the coming weeks or that has already been asphalted?
Actually, this is going to be decided by the council. I mean, this is decided by council, not by me, but I can assure you how, as a honourable gentleman, there has been a long list of roads that have been earmarked for resurfacing.
The Honourable Vice Prime Minister, with regard to the long list that he has received from the council, will all those lanes and roads be resurfaced or asphalted in this financial year?
That's what we are planning to do. That's what we are planning to do. Okay.
Next question.
131.
Monsieur le Président, en ce qui concerne la partie A de la question, je dépose les informations demandées sur les taux de vente indicatifs moyens du dollar américain, de la livre sterling et de l'euro pour chacune des années 2014 à 2021, ainsi que pour la période allant du 1er janvier 2022 au 31 mars 2022, tel que fourni par la Banque de Maurice. C'est une moyenne des taux de change que je suis en train de donner. En ce qui concerne la partie B de la question, depuis mars 2020 à ce jour, la Banque de Maurice a vendu 2,8 milliards de dollars américains sur le marché. L'approvisionnement régulier du marché en devises étrangères par la Banque de Maurice a limité les perturbations du fonctionnement normal du marché d'échange. Merci.
Regarding question B, why is the Honourable Minister giving the figures only for this year? The figures I requested was for each of the year 2014 to 2021, the amount, so that we can see a trend. How much money does the Bank of Mauritius intervene in the market to support the rupee?
Monsieur le Président, je tiens à m'excuser auprès de l'honorable membre. C'est sûr que c'est la question qu'il avait posée. C'est sûr qu'il manque cet élément dans la réponse. Je vais faire le nécessaire pour déposer cette réponse à la Chambre.
Doesn't the Honourable Minister is aware, based on the figures he's provided himself, that the exchange rate of rupee to dollar has depreciated by 40% since 2014 to today? Doesn't he agree that one of the reasons for this depreciation is the fact that government has depleted the Bank of Mauritius of 158 billion rupees, 78 billion as grant and 80 billion to MIC, and today the Bank of Mauritius doesn't have sufficient money to intervene in the market to support the Mauritian rupee?
Monsieur le Président, de tout temps, le Maurice est considéré comme un régime flottant, floating regime, au lieu d'être un régime fixe par le FMI. Cela nous aide concernant notre centre international financier. Pour répondre à la question de l'honorable membre, de tout temps, le FMI nous dit que notre roupie est surévaluée. C'est pour cela que vous aviez dans le passé des interventions régulières de la Banque de Maurice pour essayer d'équilibrer la valeur de la roupie. Ainsi, vous avez une dépréciation continue de la roupie du fait qu'il y a des entrées en devises concernant le marché financier. Pour revenir sur la question concernant est-ce qu'on a deplete ou pas, c'est pour cela qu'il y a eu une dépréciation de 40%, je tiens à rappeler à l'honorable membre, j'ai dit ça ce matin, qu'entre la période 2020 et 2022, nous avions un manque à gagner d'environ, au minimum, d'environ 3 milliards de dollars. Cela a impacté sur le marché des devises et sur la valeur de notre roupie. Le fait de la forte demande en devises étrangères et aussi du fait d'une offre restreinte, c'est sûr que cela a provoqué une dépréciation de notre roupie. Et d'un autre côté, la Banque de Maurice, pour respecter le fait qu'on soit en régime flottant, nous ne pouvions pas intervenir massivement pour maintenir la valeur de la roupie. Et il fallait aussi avoir une proactivité, aussi regarder sur le futur. Si jamais nous avions toujours, et que cette pandémie restait avec nous pendant des années, nous devions faire en sorte d'avoir suffisamment de réserves pour maintenir une valeur équilibrée de la roupie. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Minister of Finance knows that as a result of the depreciation of the rupee, everything, all our imports are going up, including price of petroleum products, price of pharmacy products. So would the Honourable Minister of Finance consider discussing with the central bank in order to support the rupee and also to cure, there's a problem, I get to understand that there is a shortage of currency today on the market.
Monsieur le Président, c'est sûr. Nous sommes passés, comme je l'ai dit ce matin, d'1,4 million de touristes à 176 000 touristes pour l'année 2021. C'est sûr qu'avec l'objectif fixé par le DPM de 1 million de touristes pour l'année 2022, cela va rapporter plus de devises étrangères au pays et à ce moment précis, à ce moment-là, c'est sûr que la Banque de Maurice aura plus de marge de manœuvre pour faire en sorte de retrouver une valeur plus élevée pour notre roupie. Et il va travailler dans ce sens et je vais faire le nécessaire pour parler avec le gouverneur. Mais de toute façon, la Banque de Maurice a de tout temps travaillé pour maintenir une roupie équilibrée. Merci.
Next question.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the motorway M4 project is in fact the forthcoming fourth motorway of the country, which will link the north to the airport through the east, namely Forbach to Plaine-Magnan. I'm informed by the Road Development Authority that the M4 will consist of a dual carriage of approximately 50 kilometers, starting from Forbach on the motorway M2, passing through villages such as Poutre-d'Hamlet, Plaine des Roches, L'Aventure, Pont-Blanc, Bonne-Mère, Queen Victoria, Clémencia, Bel-Air, Olivia, and Ferney, to end up on the motorway M1 at Plaine-Magnan. Mr. Speaker, sir, the estimated cost of the project is 10 billion rupees and comprises 3 different segments as follows. From Bel-Air, B27 to Pont-Blanc, A2, from Pont-Blanc, A2 to Forbach, M2, and thirdly, from SSI Airport to Bel-Air on B27. Mr. Speaker, sir, financial provision is available for the implementation of the first 2 segments of the project, namely from Bel-Air to Forbach over a length of 30 kilometers. I'm informed by the RDA that in view of the extent and the specialized nature of the works, the services of a consultant, namely Lex Consult Mauritius Limited, in association with LEA Associate South Asia Private Limited and PD Naidu and Associate have been enlisted to review the design of the project, prepare the bidding document, and supervise the construction works. With respect to the construction works, I'm informed by the RDA that the procurement for the construction of the dual carriageway from Bel-Air to Forbach will be carried out in an open international advertised bidding exercise during this financial year. The works are expected to start around November 2022 and will last for a period of 24 months. As regards the segment SSR Airport to Bel-Air, the RDA is initiating action with respect to the appropriate alignment in consultation with all relevant stakeholders. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Minister in his reply mentioned that consultants have been approved to review the design. May we know from the Honourable Minister why there has been the need to review the design?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the project in respect to Phase 1, that is from Bel-Air, B27, to Pont-Blanc, A2, was initiated in financial year 2020-2021 as a single carriageway. And upon availability of funds, the bidding documents were launched on 5th January 2021. In the meantime, during consultation in the context of the budget 2021-2022, with the RDA and the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, it was discussed that given the highly expanding business activities in the east of the island, the single carriage could soon be saturated with the estimated traffic volume once the whole stretch linking the airport to north would be made operational. Besides, adding on lanes in the future phases would imply much higher costs and other teething issues, such as inconveniences to the public and road users. Furthermore, according to paragraph 96 and 97 of the public and road users, furthermore, according to paragraph 97 of the government program 2020-2024, the policy is to eliminate roundabouts on the motorways and to construct flyovers with a view of improving traffic. So all these issues has made that we review the design and relaunch the tenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, the Minister just mentioned that consultations on the way with regards to the segment from Plaine Mayon to Bel Air. Can we know if that proposed motorway will go through La Vallée-Ferney? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, discussion is ongoing with all relevant stakeholders. Last week itself, the RDA, myself and the ministry, we have had consultation. We went on site, we went to visit the forest itself. And obviously, everything will be done to avoid this forest. And in this period of Ram Navami, let's pray Jai Shri Ram. He shows us the way through the forest, the valley of Ferney also. So we will do what needs to be done with all relevant stakeholders. And once we have the plan, we will come to Cabinet for an approval, and then we will inform accordingly. So this is why fund has been made for phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 3 is on hold. We are discussing with all relevant stakeholders before a decision is taken. Thank you.
Can the Minister inform the House if provision will be made for the construction of cycle lanes along the M4?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is now a policy of government that to include cycle lane wherever it's physically possible. So obviously, on this new dual carriageway, provision for cycle lane is being made. Even if, for instance, we cannot, because of financial issues, budget issues, we cannot do it immediately. During the acquisition, during the planning, the provision is already being made for the cycle lanes.
Last supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. May we know from the Honourable Minister the total number of interchanges, grade junctions, bridges and culverts that will be constructed from the stretch from Bel Air to L'Aventure?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. 2 seconds before I find myself in my notes. I have it somewhere. It must be here. Please just bear with me. Yes. So the construction of approximately 30-kilometer long dual carriageway with 1.5 meter shoulders on both sides. There will be the construction of 3 interchanges and 8 at-grade junctions, construction of 9 bridges, drainage network over 50 culverts, and obviously, as I just replied, provision for a cycle lane, provision for road furnitures for all the safety of road users.
Next question.
B133.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I shall reply to PQ B133. Mr. Speaker, sir, the introduction of the 16-seater microbuses by the National Transport Corporation on its route network form part of its strategy to mitigate rising operating costs. The microbuses are used primarily for short services during off-peak hours on routes where ridership is low and where the operation of high seat capacity buses is not cost-effective. Regarding part A of the question, I wish to inform the House that as at 31st March 2022, the NTC has acquired a total of 19 16-seater microbuses. Regarding part B of the question, the cost per bus is 1.4 million, 61,667. Mr. Speaker, sir, with respect to part C of the question, I'm informed that the microbuses are operating short services on the following routes. Route 6, that is, Chemin Grenier to Rivière des Anguilles. Route 14, from Cupip to Rosebel. Route 34, Cupip to Bois-Chéry. Route 37, Birkingham via Quatre-Bornes to Victoria Hospital. Route 79, Rosebel to Bois-Chéry via Wireless Road. Route 87, Cupip Yanpalak South to Saint-Hubert Terminus. Route 133, Choisy via Bedjkap to Chemin Grenier. Route 137, Cupip to Karouacasia, Kankarol, Kenya, Karouenouf. Route 197, Chamouni via Chemin Grenier to Port-Louis. Route 122, Camp-le-Vieux via Quatre-Bornes to Victoria Hospital. Concerning part D of the question, the NTC is currently reviewing its operational plan, following which a decision will be taken regarding the acquisition of additional 16-seater microbuses and the routes on which they would operate. Finally, regarding part E of the question, I'm informed by the NTC that no extra fares are levied on passengers traveling on board of the microbuses at present. Thank you.
Can we obtain from the Honourable Minister the number of passengers that travel on microbuses on a daily basis?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm told that on average, one 16-seater bus carries 150 passengers on a daily basis. Thank you.
Can the Minister inform the House of the implication in terms of costs for the NTC on operating the 15-seater bus instead of the normal 50-seater bus?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that for the 16-seater bus, there is a saving on diesel costs of almost 60%. Microbuses consume ₹5.30 per kilometer, while the 50-seater bus consumes approximately ₹13 per kilometer. For free van, for 1,300 kilometers, the diesel consumption is ₹7,000 for 1 day, instead of ₹17,000 for a 50-seater bus. Also, the 60-seater bus uses 4 wheels instead of 6, and wheels for smaller buses cost ₹24,000, while for a 50-seater, the cost is ₹78,000 per bus, so the difference is ₹54,000. And the maintenance costs for microbuses, they have 3 years warranty. On average, a considerable reduction in costs...
What is happening there?
Mal élevé, comme d'habitude. It's a question of education.
You don't have the floor, Honourable Juman. You don't have the floor. How can you intervene? We are in the temple of democracy. Please continue.
So, on an average, a considerable reduction in costs has been observed for the operation of the 16-seater buses, especially on routes which are less profitable at off-peak hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reply to PQ B608, which I addressed to the Honourable Minister of Land and Transport regarding microbuses, can I ask the Honourable Minister whether he has any information whether the route 256 linking Cité Rosemont in Vallée Pitot to Plaine Verte will be considered and eligible for microbuses now?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Member will appreciate that this question does not pertain to that issue he is raising here. I think that should be addressed to the substantive minister. Thank you. But anyway, I'll pass on the message.
The table has been advised that PQB 164, 135, 146, 169, 207 have been withdrawn. Next question.
Thank you. B134.
That's free in a row. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the very outset, I wish to inform the House that the study on aggregates and other construction materials in Mauritius was commissioned in July 2020, following a request obtained for the exportation aggregates. Accordingly, the results of the study are to serve as a working document to government, in particular my ministry and the Construction Industry Development Board, to formulate appropriate strategies for informed policy decisions regarding the management of aggregates and other construction materials in Mauritius. The study, Mr. Speaker, sir, was conducted by a local consultant whose services were hired by the Construction Industry Development Board after a procurement exercise. The consultant, amongst other things, undertook a study to determine the volume of suitable rocks and stone available in Mauritius for the production of aggregates and the requirements of the local construction industry. It also covered the requirements in terms of other construction materials, namely cement, reinforced bars, concrete blocks, ready-mix concrete, and bitumen. Mr. Speaker, sir, for the purpose of the study, the consultant surveyed the stone crusher plants, the producers of ready-mix concrete, block work, and asphaltic concrete, as well as the suppliers of cement, iron bars, and bitumen. In this process, therefore, the consultant had recourse to sensitive commercial information from private sector operators of the construction industry to make its recommendations. In this respect, the Honourable Member will agree that it would not be ethical to reveal such information at this stage. In fact, the consultant has submitted its report in January 2022, and government has agreed to the setting up of a high-level committee to consider its finding and recommendation of the report and prepare a draft master plan on the management of aggregate and other construction material in Mauritius. My ministry will thereafter have wider consultation on the draft master plan prior to its implementation. Thank you.
Time over.
Mr. Speaker, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
The question is that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favour say aye, those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it.
Statement by Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I wish, on a good note, to make a statement apprising the House on the latest developments regarding the delisting of Mauritius from the European Union's list of high-risk third countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg for the indulgence of the House in view of the fact that the statement is unusually lengthy. Mr. Speaker, sir, in its official journal, dated 21st February 2022, the European Commission concluded that Mauritius has strengthened the effectiveness of its anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism framework, and no longer represents strategic deficiencies as initially identified by the Financial Action Task Force, that is the FATF. Accordingly, Mauritius was officially removed from the European Union's list of high-risk third countries as from 13th March 2022. This is indeed another important achievement following the delisting of Mauritius from the FATF list
of jurisdictions under increased monitoring in October 2021, and from the United Kingdom's list of high-risk third countries in November 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, all along this process, Mauritius has demonstrated a strong political will and commitment to adhere to and to effectively implement the FATF global standards. This also signifies our commitment to reinforce the position of Mauritius as a reputed and trusted international financial center. The delisting of Mauritius from the grey and now blacklist bears testimony to our robust legal, regulatory, institutional, and operational framework to effectively comply with the AML-CFT obligations and to our ability to protect and enhance the resilience of the financial services sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will take a few minutes of the House to reflect on what we, as a country, as a government, have achieved together in strengthening and building a robust AML-CFT regime. It is important to highlight and enumerate some of the key measures behind this achievement within such a short time span. The House will recall that this government embarked on an extremely ambitious exercise to overhaul the AML-CFT framework and address all the identified deficiencies following the mutual evaluation of Mauritius in 2018, both at the level of technical compliance and effectiveness of the regime. This exercise, under the patronage of the Honourable Prime Minister, resulted in the adoption of new laws and regulations, the reinforcement of the collaboration amongst institutions, the intensive training and outreach activities to develop technical capacity across the relevant institutions in the fight against financial crimes, money laundering, and terrorism financing. It is also noteworthy that around 47 pieces of legislation were either introduced or amended since 2018. On the basis of these reforms, Mauritius is now compliant, or largely compliant, with 39 out of the 40 FATF recommendations. The application of the technical compliance re-rating for the only remaining recommendation, namely recommendation 15 on new technologies, has already been made to the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group Secretariat, that is the SAMLAG. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a significant achievement, as at the time of the adoption of the Mutual Evaluation Report in 2018, Mauritius was rated compliant or largely compliant with only 14 of the 40 FATF recommendations. The progress made in improving the technical requirements within this time frame has also been recognized and endorsed by the FATF and its global network. This has not been an easy task and is evidence of the firm commitment of the government and the hard work of our officers in ensuring compliance with international standards at all times. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will surely agree that it is not enough to pass laws, but we must also have the capacity to effectively implement them. Apart from these important legislative changes, we also focused our efforts on the development of human capabilities within the AML-CFT agencies in order to enable them in carrying out their functions efficiently. In this context, from July 2020 to March 2022, a total of 115 training sessions have been organized for the benefit of some 2,400 participants from supervisory authorities, law enforcement agencies, and other relevant competent authorities in Mauritius. With regard to the strategic deficiencies identified by the FATF, in relation to the effectiveness of our system, government adopted numerous measures and put in place strong and sustainable mechanisms to address those deficiencies. The measures taken include robust supervision of the global business and non-bank financial services sector, reinforcement of the regulatory landscape for supervising the activities of the designated non-financial businesses and professions, better control and regulation of beneficial ownership information, which includes a range of controls devised to ensure that beneficial ownership information remains accurate and up-to-date at all times, stronger monitoring of non-profit organizations, and enforcement actions at the level of investigation, prosecution, and sanctioning. All the measures which have been put in place by Mauritius are effectively contributing towards the protection of our economy, increasing our competitiveness, attracting foreign direct investment, and reinforcing our reputation as a sound place to do business. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have mentioned this previously and in this August Assembly, and would do it again today, as it is important to recognize and put on record that this achievement would not have been possible without the sustained efforts of our people and institutions. I have to start with the Honourable Prime Minister himself, who has provided his unflinching and unwavering support in this overhaul of our systems. I wish to also acknowledge colleagues from the Interministerial Committee who have been instrumental in ensuring that AML CFT policies were promptly adopted and implemented to adequately address these strategic deficiencies. I also need to underscore the crucial role and efforts put into by the members of the core group in closely monitoring the implementation of the FATF Action Plan and providing strategic guidance to our AML CFT agencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, these positive outcomes would not have been possible without the hard work of the officers from various institutions, namely my ministry, the National Sanctions Secretariat under the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, the Attorney General's Office, the Bank of Mauritius, the Independent Commission Against Corruption, the Financial Services Commission, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the Gambling Regulatory Authority, the Integrity Reporting Services Agency, the Mauritius Institute of Professional Accountants, the Mauritius Police Force, the Mauritius Revenue Authority, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Registrar of Associations, and the Registrar of Companies. They have worked diligently and tirelessly around the clock to honor the high-level commitment given to the FATF to implement the action plan. The private sector remains a key partner in this national effort to fight against money laundering and terrorism financing. In this respect, we engaged with the private sector on a regular basis to enlist their support in this process. I stress our agencies and the private sector have displayed an unprecedented spirit of teamwork and collaboration. I would like to also place on record the assistance extended by the international community, namely the ESAMLAG Secretariat, the EU Global AML CFT Facility, the German Development Agency, the United Kingdom, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund to support Mauritius in its endeavor to fight money laundering and terrorism financing. I'm pleased to inform the House that Mauritius is now partnering with the EU AML CFT Global Facility to deliver technical assistance to countries having strategic AML CFT deficiencies based on the Mauritian experience. This bears testimony to what we have achieved in such a short period of time and gives credence to the proficiency we have built, much to the satisfaction of the international community, that we are now a reference in the region. Mr. Speaker, sir, now that this overhaul is done, now that we have completed the strengthening of our systems, now that we have laid the foundations of good governance in a holistic and systemic way for decades to come, and now that we have ensured that the reputation of our international financial center is not blemished, it is imperative that we look ahead. It is essential that we translate all the work accomplished into business opportunities. We are therefore working towards a leapfrogging of our financial services sector to its next generation of growth and sophistication. As defined by late Sir Honourable Jugnut in the government's Vision 2030, the target is to double the size of the financial sector and grow its contribution to GDP in real terms. Such a growth would increase employment for our people, including our young graduates, and increase our tax revenue significantly. As such, our strategy is threefold. Reposition our global business sector internationally with a particular focus on the image and branding, increase the depth and breadth of services we offer as a jurisdiction, and ensure that the products we have are avant-gardist and investor-friendly. We have successfully navigated through a number of thorough assessments of our jurisdiction, including on tax matters by organizations such as the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices of the OECD and the Code of Conduct Group of the EU, and AML-CFT matters by organizations such as ESAMLAG, FATF, and the EU. And we have fared remarkably well. It is now high time that we ventilate these achievements in a concerted manner internationally afin de redorer le blason de notre centre financier. My ministry will therefore coordinate efforts with relevant institutions and agencies to work towards enlisting services of global media and PR firms as is so determined, as well as building capacities institutionally to make our jurisdiction's image visible in an assertive way. We are also reactivating all our synergies in the repositioning and marketing of our jurisdiction internationally so as to consolidate our existing markets such as India, Europe, and Africa, and to access new markets. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to emphasize that the most noted systemic overhaul of our financial services product landscape was accomplished by the Honourable Prime Minister in his 2016-2017 budget speech, which saw the introduction of investment banking, family offices, headquarter, and treasury management schemes, amongst others. The corresponding laws were enacted in the Finance Act, which followed, and rules were subsequently made by the Financial Services Commission. The laws were avant-gardist and provided the right foundations, and over the years since then, and in line with global financial complexity and structuring, the rules and regulations have to be updated or rewritten to satisfy the aspirations of the operators and investors alike. Time has also allowed us to understand better about what most appropriate operational modalities are expected from the jurisdiction. Therefore, my ministry, together with the FSC, will embark on a complete assessment of all the regulatory framework, and I will seek the support of the technical expertise of the Financial Services Consultative Council in this task. And I hasten to add, since our operators are at the forefront of the use of such products, I will ensure that there are industry consultations, either individually or collectively, as are so needed when this exercise happens. I will also ensure that such an exercise is sustainable so that a mechanism is well entrenched for amending products whenever needed to maintain competitiveness in a timely manner and to also ensure the same rigor is applied for the introduction of new products. Mr. Speaker, sir, I must further add that these delistings ahead of the set time frame, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, indeed demonstrate the resilience of our financial system, the efforts of our officers, and the perseverance of the whole nation to get our country's name cleared. Government is maintaining this momentum by gearing its effort towards sustaining the reforms and ensuring the effectiveness of the measures undertaken. In this regard, the commitment of Mauritius to pursue the implementation of its reform is clear and robust. I wish to also point out that as part of our preparedness plan, we are already working on updating our national risk assessment and devising a new national AML CFT action plan for the coming 3 years. In addition, Mauritius will continue to conduct intensive training and outreach activities to develop technical capacity across the relevant institutions in our fight against money laundering, terrorism, and proliferation financing. I wish to assure the House that at the level of the Interministerial Committee, which is chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister himself, the core group, under the chairmanship of the Financial Secretary, and the National AML CFT Committee, chaired by the Permanent Secretary of my ministry, we are sparing no efforts in investing in our people and infrastructure, as well as in the development of innovative skills, methods, and processes to achieve this goal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Public bills, first reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Variable Capital Companies Bill number 3 of 2022 be read first time.
Seconded.
Public bills, second reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Revision of Laws Amendment Bill number 20 of 2021 be read a second time.
Seconded.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as the explanatory memorandum sets out, the main object of this bill is to amend the Revision of Laws Act to provide that an electronic revised edition of all acts, including regulations, shall be published on the web portal of the Attorney General's Office, and such electronic revised edition shall be regarded as equivalent to the enactments included in a revised edition and shall be deemed to be the official text of the enactments so published and be taken to be the laws of Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, sir, to properly understand the context in which the Revision of Laws Act was passed by the legislature in 1974, it is important that we look at the legal framework, and especially it is important to look at the historical development of publication of our laws in this country. First things first, Mr. Speaker, the power to make laws rests with Parliament. That is provided for in our Constitution, namely in Section 45. The power to make laws rests with Parliament. And in Section 46, it is also provided in the Constitution that in subsection 3, and I quote, where the President assents to a bill that has been submitted to him in accordance with this Constitution, the bill shall become law
and the President shall thereupon cause it to be published in the Gazette as a law. End of quote. Mr. Speaker, sir, the laws of Mauritius do not constitute of only acts of Parliament, but also subsidiary legislations, which are made under delegated powers of Parliament. And in order to understand acts of Parliament or subsidiary legislation, one needs also to have access to proclamations which give effect to acts of Parliament. So therefore, a person wishing to have access to the body of laws of Mauritius needs to search in the Gazette for the main act, in the subsidiary legislations, to find out where is the proclamation, to know whether a particular act has come into force or not. So this begs the question of access to legislation, et a fortiori, access to justice. If we look at the history of this country, in the colonial days, where the laws of Mauritius were scattered, the first time that the laws of Mauritius were consolidated was in the year 1866. That was when the first edition of the laws of Mauritius was edited. And that edition contained the statutes passed up to the year 1866. And that first revision exercise was carried out in 1897. Following that, we all know of the revised edition of the laws of Mauritius, which was published in 1920. Subsequently, there was the famous publication in 1945 by Sir Charlton Lane, the then Chief Justice. That 1945 edition, Mr. Speaker, sir, was printed and bound in England in 1946. Practitioners know of the existence of this edition of which is commonly known as Lane, and it is still available in certain libraries, including the Supreme Court Library. The difficulty with the publication, which was in England in 1946, only became effective in Mauritius in 1952. There was already then a difference from 1945 to 1952. As time went by, other legislations were passed, amending or repealing previous ones, thus leading to the confusion as to what was the state of the law at a particular point in time. That led the legislature, with time, to enact the Revision of Laws Act in 1974. The Revision of Laws Act 1974, which was introduced in the House by then Attorney General Honourable Bussier, was introduced in the House to provide that the Law Revision Unit of the Attorney General's Office shall prepare revised editions and supplements under Section 3 of that Act periodically and publish what is known as the revised laws of Mauritius, which shall be printed and which shall come into operation on a particular day, and which shall be taken to be the sole official text of the enactments included in it, and be taken to be the law of Mauritius. This is provided for in Section 4, subsection 5 of the Revision of Laws Act 1974. It is important to bear in mind that when the bill of the Revision of Laws Act, the Revision of Laws Bill was introduced in the House, the then Attorney General, Honourable Bussier, had already informed the House that the Law Revision Unit had already existed since 1971 on an ad hoc basis. The work had already started, and with the Revision of Laws Act 1974, there was therefore a statutory basis for the Law Revision Unit to consolidate laws and to publish laws which are enforced in Mauritius at a particular date, that is, which is called a cut-off date. From 1974, historically, therefore, if we look at the publication of the revised laws of Mauritius, we have, after the Revision of Laws Act 1974, the first publication, that is in 1981. At the time of publication, Honourable Paul Chong Long was the Attorney General, and the laws of Mauritius were published in a series of volumes, and we commonly see it in libraries, including in the National Assembly's library with color blue. That 1981 Revised Laws of Mauritius, edition 1981, was published with the assistance and collaboration in those days of the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation and the New Zealand government, together with their financial assistance. In those days, the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation made available the services of Mr. Angelo of the Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, for that exercise. The printing then was done by a company called Presigraph Limited. After the 1981 edition, we had other editions in 1996, I believe, but they were, I hasten to add, they were unofficial editions. The official edition of the Laws of Mauritius is published under the Revision of Laws Act. The 1981 is an official edition. The next one after the 1981 came only in the 2000 edition of the Revised Laws of Mauritius, in the days of the then Attorney General, Honourable Emmanuel Leung Shing. And again, the services of Professor Angelo were retained, and the publication was done by Best Graphics Law Publishers Limited. In fact, pour la petite histoire, Best Graphics had published the unofficial editions in 1996, and there was a previous one also in 1990, but I again say the official publication is through the Law Revision Unit of the Attorney General's Office under the Revision of Laws Act. After the 2000 official edition of the Revised Laws of Mauritius came the other edition in 2008. When the services of publishers LexisNexis Butterworth Limited, a publisher based in South Africa, were retained for the printing in loose leaf format in 2008, and that was in the days of Honourable Valaiden, who was then the Attorney General. Since then, the edition of the 2008, no official publication of revised laws have been published. The loose format of publication in 2008 was obviously done for purposes of updating. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, my office and this government, we have decided that we need to take a step ahead. And the only way to take a step ahead, to provide access to legislation, access to subsidiary legislation, access to proclamations, is through the use of technology. Therefore, in the year 2020, my office launched an open international bidding so that we could retain the services of a service provider with the appropriate software. And the software that has been retained is called LegisPro. LegisPro is a software made by the company in the United States called Xcential, X with a capital X, Central. And this software has been used for a number of years by the Office of the Law Revision Council of the US House of Representatives in the United States. Xcential, together with their local representative, were retained for the electronic revised edition of the laws of Mauritius. And this is the background behind the bill today. The idea is, the intention is to publish the electronic revised edition of the laws of Mauritius on the web page, and the publication of that electronic version will have the same equivalent value in law as a printed hard copy of the revised laws of Mauritius. Let me now, therefore, come to the features of the forthcoming electronic revised edition. What will it contain? Once published on the web portal, the electronic revised edition will consist of the updated acts of Parliament, updated subsidiary legislations, the proclamations, as well as the reprints. What will be the features of the electronic revised edition? A QR code, Mr. Speaker, will be provided on every page of every legislation, and a digital signature will be provided. The legislation published will be updated, consolidated, and revised. They will not be overwritten when there is an amendment. Any amendment brought to a legislation will be uploaded as a new version. This will therefore enable the user to view every previous version of a specific legislation and compare with the amended version. Hyperlinks will be provided to enable user to view the provision of a legislation that amends a particular legislation. And hyperlink will link the user from a parent act to a subsidiary legislation made. And it will be possible to compare different legislation. Insofar as printing is concerned, a user will be able to print the whole or an extract of a legislation in case of need. The user will be able to also download the legislation. It will be possible to search, whether simple search with the title of the legislation or advanced search by applying different filters, such as the year, the date of coming into operation, or search with the use of keywords. And legislations can be viewed on multiple devices, such as mobile phones, tablets, laptops, iPads, etc. And access to legislation will not only be available to local users, but also to users in any part of the world. This is a major breakthrough, Mr. Speaker, sir, and with a view to providing that this publication of the electronic revised edition shall have the same force of law as a print hard copy, we are bringing the Revision of Laws Amendment Bill to take that one fundamental step ahead to provide access to comprehensive revised edition of the laws of Mauritius, including subsidiary laws of Mauritius. In short, Mr. Speaker, sir, and to conclude, once the electronic revised edition will be on the website, it will provide access to lawyers, to public officers, to administrators, and to the citizen to, firstly, updated legislation, secondly, at the click of a button, and thirdly, free of charge. I now commend the bill to the House.
Seconded.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we are debating a very important amendment. This bill will give power to the Attorney General to cause to be prepared and published on the web portal of his office an electronic edition of enactments. And from the date of publication on the web portal, those electronic enactments shall be deemed to be the laws of Mauritius. This is a very important amendment because it will enable the population to have better access to the law of the land. How many times have we not heard a person argue that he did not know what he was doing was an offense? How many times have we not heard that they did not know that they needed a permit before undertaking such and such business? They didn't know they needed a permit in order to construct something or even make an extension to their houses. But as honourable members are aware, ignorance of the law, save in a few exceptional circumstances, is not a defense. And even if you honestly and genuinely did not know that you were breaking the law, you're still liable on the law. So it is very important then for every citizen to know the law. But how do we know what is the law of Mauritius? As the Honourable Attorney General stated, the process of enactment, how the law is passed, then approved, and then gazetted, and then proclaimed. But today, if anyone wants to have access to the laws of Mauritius, he needs to buy a set of revised laws of Mauritius. And this revised set of Mauritius is published in 13 volumes and costs 139,325 rupees. And on top of that, you will need to buy a collection of subsidiary legislation where you have all the regulations. It comes in 7 volumes and it costs 80,000 rupees. And all law practitioners know, as soon as these enactments are published, they're already out of date. Because in the meantime, Parliament has passed new legislation, ministers have made new regulations, and then you have to buy updates. And an update will cost you around 10,000 rupees to every year. So it's very costly for practitioners to today have laws of Mauritius. And we're talking about practitioners. So if for practitioners it's so expensive, now imagine for a layperson, you know, how expensive it is to know the laws of Mauritius. And we are grateful that with this legislation, the law will be accessible on the internet at a click. As a law practitioner, Mr. Speaker, sir, I recall how difficult it was when I started as a barrister to know what are the laws, how we had to go to the Supreme Court, we go to the Supreme Court library, and then we had to subscribe for our own subscription with government printers, and we had to physically update the compilation of laws. Very time-consuming, and very often our laws were not updated. So today, we will be able, thanks to this law, to have access to the internet and to the laws and to their update. And this is why, on this side of the House, we are in favor of this enactment. Now, the Supreme Court had made an attempt to publish legislation on its website. And that helped enormously all practitioners who had to register with the Supreme Court, but then we had access to all the laws. But unfortunately, the version of the law that appears on the website of the Supreme Court is not an official version, and therefore it doesn't have any force of law. We cannot print it, we cannot download it and present it in court, because it's not an authoritative, official copy of the law. So, an electronic format of the law is also very important because you can easily amend it. For a printed version, as the Honourable Attorney General mentioned, sometimes we had to wait for a decade, 10 years or more, before you had another official publication of the revised laws of Mauritius to come and have effect. In the meantime, you had unauthorized publication, but for the official revised law edition, usually it would take 10 years. Now, with the internet version, the Honourable Attorney General did not say how often it would be updated, but I trust he will update it as soon as possible. The Law Revision Unit will do that, because the moment it is uploaded and appear on the website, it will become the authoritative laws of Mauritius. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to raise a few issues and highlight perhaps some unintended consequences of the proposed amendment, which I'm sure the Honourable Attorney General can address in his summing up. The first issue is what happens if there is an inconsistency between the electronic edition of an enactment and the printed edition of the law. This may happen because the electronic edition is likely to be more up-to-date, and because of the delay in publishing printed version of the revised laws or supplement. Which version takes precedent? Now, if we look at section 5, section 4, subsection 5A of the Revision of Law Act 1974, it reads, and I quote, "Notwithstanding section 12(1) and 13 of the Interpretation and General Clauses Act, a revised edition shall, for the purpose from the date fixed under subsection 4 and with effect from the date immediately following the cut-off date, be the sole official text of the enactment included in it and be taken to be the laws of Mauritius on the cut-off date." Now, unfortunately, today we are not amending this section. So the section will still read that the printed version will be the sole official text of the enactment. So I think the Honourable Attorney General should address this issue, or at least, change the definition of revised laws to include the electronic version. Because right now, according to section 4, subsection 5A, only the printed edition would be the sole official text. Now, the second issue I would like to raise relates to the proposed section 4B, subsection 2 of the bill, which reads, except for section 4.2b, subsection 3, subsection 4, subsection 5, 6, and 7, 4A and 6, the provision of this act shall apply to an electronic revised edition as they would apply to a revised edition. So the purpose of this section in the bill is to exclude certain existing provisions of the law which apply to printed version of revised laws. This section will no longer apply to will not apply to electronic version. Now, some of these sections, I agree, is not applicable because they relate to the printed format. But by deleting reference to these, we are also, unfortunately, having some unintended consequences. For example, if we take section 4.2b, which is being amended, at the moment, section 4.2b requires, and I quote, a statement indicating which enactment has been omitted from a revised edition pursuant to paragraph A or section 6.1 shall be embodied in the revised edition. So right now, for the printed revised edition, there is a section which sets out all the laws that has been omitted from the official list, from the official revised law. So people can know what laws, and if there is any aggrieved party, they can make representation and argue why this has been deleted. And this is very important because I'll give you an example. Just recently, in the case of the election petitions before the Supreme Court, one of the lawyers from the State Law Office had argued that the electoral regulations for representation of people were no longer applicable because that 1945 regulation was not in the updated revised edition of subsidiary legislation published by the revision unit. So why is it then that for electronic version, we don't have a similar module, a similar place where we can click and find out what are the laws that are no longer applicable in Mauritius? So that any person who is aggrieved will be able to make representation. If that law no longer appears in the website, and some of the law will not because they are spent, they are outdated or disused, but at least I think we need to have a similar provision for the electronic version of revised laws as we have for the printed version. The other provision that I'd like to draw the attention of the House to is the omission of section 6, subsection 2. So section 6 under the proposed bill, section 6 of the Act will no longer apply to electronic revised edition. Now what does section 6 says? The Attorney General may authorize the Law Revision Unit to make a change in the substance of an enactment for the purpose of a revised edition. So the power is given to the Attorney General to make a change in substance. However, there is a safeguard where a change in the substance of an enactment has been made under subsection 1, that enactment shall be laid before the Assembly and shall have effect as part of the revised edition only from such day as is fixed by the Assembly. So if today the Attorney General, through the Law Revision Unit, want to change in substance provisions of the law, he can't do that without depositing a copy in front of the House, and then this will take into force on the date the House decides. And this is very important because, again, I was involved in a case. The Honourable Minister of Social Security, who is not here, was my instructing attorney. It was a famous Azan case where the revision unit had made a change of substance by lumping in the definition of public gathering, both public meetings and public procession. And the Supreme Court held that this was a change in substance, which the law revision unit did not have the power to do unless it was sanctioned, if it was sanctioned by the National Assembly. So this section 6 is extremely important. The Attorney General, the law revision unit cannot make change in substance unless it is approved by Parliament. Now, why is this section 6 not applicable to revised edition? So either the whole section 6 should not apply, so it doesn't apply to revised edition electronically, it doesn't apply to printed version, or it applies to both. But you can't have a section which says that in the printed version, the Attorney General can, through the law revision unit, make substantive change in enactment, but in an electronic version, he cannot do that. So I don't see why there is a reason for treating the different type of revised edition differently, whether they are printed or not. The last point I would like to make, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in relation to cost. In paragraph 3 of the explanatory memorandum, it is stated, and I read, this electronic revised edition will be free of charge, and any user will, over and above of viewing the laws of Mauritius on the web portal, be able to print a copy thereof. And the Honourable Attorney General also mentioned in his intervention that members of the public, not just practitioners, members of the public also will have access to the web portal and will be able to download and print enactments. But where is it in the law? Where is it in the bill? You know, it is in the explanatory memorandum, fair enough, but shouldn't there have been a substantive provision in the revised laws of Mauritius? Because as I said, you know, at the moment, it costs more than 139,000 rupees to get one of these printed copies and 80,000 to get subsidiary legislation. We are all in favor. We're all in favor of getting free access to the laws of Mauritius, including the subsidiary legislation. But I think, in my humble opinion, there ought to have been a section, you know, giving the power at least to the Attorney General by regulation to decide, you know, if there are any fees chargeable or whether it is going to be free or not. But unfortunately, at the moment, there is nothing in the proposed legislation which would make access to the electronic revised edition free. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me start by thanking and congratulating the Honourable Attorney General for introducing this bill to the House. That is a phrase that I hardly use when intervening on bills, but today I really mean it. Let me also say my words of appreciation to the speech of Honourable Utim, the intervener before me, who certainly is going to contribute to the debates and the thinking. I shall be taking some of the points as I go along on this, and I'm sure the Attorney General will be taking up these points. This bill seeks to amend the Revision of Laws Act. It is going to introduce in our law a new concept, the revised electronic edition. Not too sure whether it is a revised electronic edition or an electronic revised edition, because both terms are used in this very short act, very short bill. Up to now, as both interveners before me have said, we had printed versions, which, as both have said, were outdated as soon as they were published. And this was under the Revision of Laws Act of 1974, which established in law an official law revision unit. And its task was to prepare revised editions and supplements. These editions were published in volumes, and the enactments to be contained in these volumes were decided by the Attorney General. Obviously, this was to allow the Attorney General to purge from our statute book stale and antiquated legislation, such as legislation which used to prohibit persons from being in possession of a camaron or a shrimp. Obviously, the Law Revision Unit had no difficulty in purging our statute book of such antiquated laws, probably dating back to the French times when camarons and shrimps ought to have been the sole privilege of certain elites. In 2011, the legislator, the Attorney General, sought to cure the problem of outdating by introducing the notion of supplements, which cost a fair amount of money to buy and to put in your volumes. But these supplements were equally outdated by the time you purchase them. So, there are two problems. First of all, as pointed out by Honourable Utim, the ordinary citizen cannot afford to buy these printed copies. Secondly, he has no access to the National Assembly Library or to the Supreme Court Library, so that he has to turn to lawyers and pay them. Perhaps it's more costly to pay lawyers than to buy these books in the first instance, but he has to turn to lawyers in order to know what the law contains. This is why, and the Attorney General has alluded to this, the Supreme Court and the Attorney General have separately published their own versions of legislations in force in Mauritius. But these are unofficial versions, so that finally, when there are problems such as in the Azan case alluded to by Honourable Utim, finally you have to go back to the Government Gazette, and we shall come to the situation of conflict between versions, which is indeed a very topical situation. Let me take two examples. The Optical Council Act and the Mauritius Emerging Technologies Act. They were passed on 30 June 2021. They are published on the website of the Supreme Court, but they do not appear on the website of the Attorney General's office. Were they removed on purpose, or was it an accident by the Law Revision Unit? We hope that with the new setup, all these little but very important omissions will be cured. There is the problem of the cut-off date. This will change now, because now, as soon as legislation is passed, well, we hope, the state of our law will be available to all the world and in real time and free of charge. But there are certain dangers, because with haste comes errors, so that the Law Revision Unit will have to be extremely careful that in trying to update as fast as possible, no errors are committed. Now, there are three principles on which I'd like to dwell, Mr. Speaker. The first one is that no one can be heard to say that he ignored the law. Secondly, and both interveners have mentioned that, laws should be freely accessible, which they are not up to now. And thirdly, laws should be intelligible. In 1997, the Conseil constitutionnel made these remarks, which are still very live for us. The first principle, if you want to be pompous, nemo sensetur ignorare legem. You can't ignore the law. There have been examples. There was that Mauritian citizen who had lived and worked a long time in Europe. He decided at retirement age to come back to Mauritius, and he transferred a fair amount of money from his bank in Europe to a bank in Mauritius. That was a perfectly normal and legal transaction. Then when he came to Mauritius, after a certain time, he was told that another bank could get him a better rate of interest. So what did he do? He went to his first bank. He withdrew, it was an account in euros. He withdrew about 1 million rupees in euro from his own bank account and transported that to the other bank, which was not very far away, and deposited it in a new account in order to get 0.25% interest more. The second bank reported this as a money laundering offense. And he said, but I did not know this could be a money laundering offense. This is my money. I can prove that it is clean. So why do you... it's an interpretation of the law. And he says, I did not know of that law and of that particular interpretation. Unfortunately, he was found guilty in the intermediate court. His conviction was confirmed in the Supreme Court, and he went to the Privy Council. The lordships of the Privy Council had considerable sympathy with the gentleman, but their lordship said, the law is the law. Even if you ignored the existence of that law, the only thing we can do for you is to recommend that the punishment be the least possible. That is going to be cured now with what the Attorney General is doing, because at a click of your mouse or whatever you call it, you will be able to know what the law says, and you will no longer have any excuse. The second principle I want to talk of is acceptability. What has happened is that traditionally, in order to show that you knew the law, that the law had to be published in the government gazette. But of course, who reads the gazette? And even amongst us, we receive the gazette and its legal supplement every time it is printed. I'm tempted to say, raise up your hand if you read the gazette from cover to cover. And of course, if you remember or take notes in your booklet for this. And the greatest achievement of this bill will be certainly accessibility. The Attorney General has talked at some length with the history of the legislation. I would like to put in my personal notes, if only to be on the record on that matter. I shall start with Lane, Sir Charlton Lane, who was commissioned to write the Lane edition, and which by the time it was printed was already out of date. He was the Chief Justice of Mauritius. His task was huge. Legal provisions were scattered everywhere, and he had to identify which laws were in force. And he put all this in several volumes, which still exist. When I started at the bar, this was still the authoritative source of law, and you would have to quote, for instance, the Employment and Labor Ordinance, Cap 214, because each volume was divided into chapters, capitulum, and you also had Lane subsidiary edition. And there was no provision for a regular update of Lane. So when I joined the bar, Lane was the lawyer's nightmare. Sir Ivor Richardson, great lawyer who wrote a little bit about drafting of legislation in Mauritius, he wrote on the state of our law in the 60s, and I quote, "The legislative materials were a scattered mess, some missing, others the subject of further amendments made without awareness of earlier changes." In 1959, the governor then had made an attempt to revive Lane. Of course, Lane had gone. He looked for a commissioner to do that task. Nobody agreed. And it remained like this, a dead piece of legislation, the revised edition of the Laws Ordinance of 1959. The Bar Council, members of the National Assembly, protested and urged government to do something about it. Nothing was done until 1966. And the Honourable Attorney General has mentioned him, Anthony Angelo. It is strange how little coincidences can affect the history of a country. Anthony Angelo was a very young student. He left Australia, New Zealand. He went to Europe to study comparative law. He studied principally in Italy. And on his way back, the ship stopped him in Mauritius, and he had to wait for the next Qantas flight to Perth, which in those days was an expedition. Not knowing what to do in Mauritius, he went to the races. And on going to the races, he met Mr. Edwin Vanchard, who was a passionate member of the Turf Club, as it was called then. Angelo started talking to him. Angelo had studied languages and had studied law, and he was a good ballet dancer. He was member of the National Ballet of New Zealand. So conversations were extremely interesting with such a man, and Vanchard took a liking to him. And he started, Angelo, studying our system of law, which is, of course, the epitome of comparative law, French, English, and Indian law. And Vanchard told him about the parlous state of our legislation. We owe a lot to Angelo. With the support of Paul N., who was then Attorney General. I'm saying all this in order that these names be on record. A law revision unit was set up. and he trained junior officials, not necessarily lawyers, and he trained them in legal drafting. Among them, there were André Pompon, who ended his career as the clerk of this assembly, and there was a young clerk who finally became the Chief Justice of Mauritius, K.P. Matadine. When I came back to Mauritius and in 1978, I was fortunate to join the State Law Office, and I was assigned junior menial tasks in that law revision unit. And Matadine was also a lawyer by that time. He had taken charge because he knew the work, and Vanchard and Angelo were the leaders in that unit. The purpose of that unit, in the words of Paul I, was to get rid of a mass of cumbrous and obsolete legislation, which still existed in our statute book. And so, in 1972, or was it 71, this unofficial consolidated version of the laws of Mauritius was published, setting out the laws in force in Mauritius as at 31 December 71. It contained, and still contains, a preface under the signature of Paul I, then Attorney General. It did not have the force of law, and no lawyer was authorized to cite from this new version in court, and you had to cite from Lane. The judges were then very conservative, and they would not allow you to do things which was out of their traditional ways. Then Angelo, with the assistance of the CFTC, started preparing the official version. And that is how, in 1974, Emmanuel Bussier moved for the second reading of the Revision of Laws Bill. Wide powers were given to the Law Revision Unit, including changes of substance, provided they were placed before the Assembly. We shall come to that later, because the Act said that the list of enactments containing the changes of substance had to be placed before the Assembly. But what is a change of substance? Up to now, judges and lawyers struggle with one another as to know what is that change of substance. I pass on to 1981, when Mr. Chong Leong, then Attorney General, presented another amendment to the Act. That was a time when I was still in the Law Revision Unit and assisting Matadine. Matadine has, over the years, amassed a considerable experience in legislative drafting. I'm sure his talents could be put to better use than what they are being used to today. Let me come to principle number 3. The law must be intelligible. There are still a number of texts to be corrected. I went through the Medical Council Act a few weeks ago. There are sections which are just unintelligible. You look at the New York Convention Act, which says that an award which is made in English or French language shall be deemed to have been made in an official language of Mauritius. And yet, there is no such thing as an official language in Mauritius. The only reference to language in our constitution is for the use of English in this house and alternatively French. the revision of laws will be able to correct it. We have it in the new Copyright Act, a multitude of gibberish which needs to be corrected. I will conclude now. The points taken by Honourable Utim need serious and careful consideration. He alluded to the conflicts between the versions, but not only between the electronic and the printed version. What about conflicts with the government gazette? The courts will decide. There is no solution to it. You cannot say one version will prevail over another. When there is a serious issue, the courts, as they have done. I remember Robert Annie, the Judge Annie, dealing with a matter of conflict between the government gazette and the revised edition, saying, ça c'est une vanchardise, in the manner that Robert Annie used to speak. And he had to deliver a judgment, and he resolved the conflict, not in the best way possible, but he did resolve it. The possibilities of downloading and printing, yes. I don't think we need to insert a provision in the law for this. The Attorney General will give suitable directives as to how to download this new company, I don't know what it is, Legis Pro, will find ways and means. I'm sure they must be very clever at doing this, to allow downloading. It is very important that we be allowed to make a copy of a part of a text in order to put it in a submission, in a work, or any other paper we are preparing, or in fact to copy the whole of this act. So I'm sure the Attorney General will take care of this without having to make an amendment to the law. We should not underestimate the magnitude of the task. I'm happy to note that it is what appears to be a reputable company which will do the software, but doing the software is not the end of the world. One has got to operate it, and that is where the devil will be, because that is where omissions will be made through inattention and through carelessness. So we will have to be careful that the structure of the law revision unit is such that it does meet the requirements of the law. The law, and the problem is that with that new system, you won't have time to proofread, correct, alter, see the commas and the punctuation. And that will be the challenge. The members of the unit, I think members of the parquet, the Attorney General, must organize for some form of formal training in legislative drafting. New Zealand is probably the best in the world in legislative drafting. If we have adequate trainers, then we can avoid a lot of problems with our legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry if I abused of the time of the House, but there are certain matters which I wanted to place on record, and I'm thankful to the Attorney General for that great opportunity that he provides to the country in the matter of our democratic institutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ignorance of standing orders is no excuse.